See Joe's chair again. Joe's shelf. Joe's stuff.
I don't know what that was.
I can see and hear you again.
You still can't hear me?
Check, check. I can hear you.
Okay. That was obnoxious.
Ready?
I thought so. I suppose. Are we live? Can you see us? Somebody please type in the chat so I don't lose my brain.
Now.
Okay.
Hopefully people can hear us.
This is what I get for redoing an entire room. It's not my choice, but higher ups wanted to put another desk in this room, which meant that the entire room had to get reconfigured for it to fit. So that meant the entire stream setup got torn down and put back up. But this is the first time I've done anything with it since that all happened. So here we are. My apologies. Life happens. Good to know.
Good. Carol says, and Blake says that they can hear us.
Sweet. Awesome. Awesome. Possum. But I don't have my water. Apparently I'm behind today.
Well, good thing we don't have a Ryan Holiday book to cover today or anything.
I know, talking about discipline. It's a good thing that's not happening.
Good thing this won't be a long one.
Correct. All right.
So it can't be. I gotta be done by 4.
I had a starting point. I gotta find it. Oh, I got it. Okay. I think I'm ready whenever you're ready, sir.
All right. Let's. I just want to see if is my opal gonna freak out if I let it focus on my face? No, I think we're good. Okay.
Wouldn't the camera be in better shape if it focused on your face?
Well, I don't know. It just looks fuzzy today for some reason, and I've always had it like locked on the focus, but maybe that's just the video that I send to you gets fuzzy compared to yours in the live stream. I don't know.
Maybe that's Zoom.
Could be. Yeah, but see, it's not on my end. That's what I'm confused by. So, whatever. NBD.
I don't know.
I got a face for radio anyways. Everyone's going to listen to this, not watch it.
Sometimes that is what I hope. Yes.
All right. Let's push the buttons and make a podcast, unless you need a second for your intro thingy.
No, I got it.
He's got it, folks. Let's make a podcast.
Okay. All right. I'm good when you are. Give me a countdown.
3, 2, 1.
So, Mike, last time you mentioned this thing called Raycast. And I went and looked into it because I had heard of it, but I hadn't actually done any research on it. And for those who don't know, Raycast is an Alfred. I don't know if I would say competitor. I don't think I'm going to say competitor.
It's a launcher app. It's a Spotlight competitor, if you want to call it that. I think if you're going to compare Alfred to Spotlight, it's fair to compare Raycast to Spotlight. But if you're looking to compare something to Alfred, maybe it's not fair to compare Raycast.
Sure. I could see that. What I found in my research for Raycast was, I'm going to say sketchy at best. I was not thrilled with it.
What do you mean by sketchy? They're like secret lives of the founders that I'm not aware of.
I don't think I would say secret lives of the founders. I would say, how would I say that? Their terms of service are questionable.
Okay.
Because basically it allows them to collect all of your information and use it for whatever purpose they want. Which I'm not super thrilled about, to be honest. Just gonna say.
I don't think it's quite as broad as that. I've heard rumblings of that sort of thing when it first came out.
Yeah.
But I I think if you look at the terms, which have not, my guess is that I'll be able to see how you drew that conclusion, but I'm also going to assume that it's not as bad as you are projecting it to be.
Yeah, maybe do that because my cursory glance over terms told me I don't want anything to do with this.
Fair enough.
So you're welcome to prove me wrong. I would be all ears if I am wrong. I do know, like, one of the things that people tend to say is in Raycast's favor is it's a team working on it instead of like a single person, which is, I don't know if that's entirely true of Alfred, but it's pretty close. Like, it's not a huge team that's working on that. But I also know that there's a $15 million funding round that Raycast just went through as well. Basically, I would just be sitting tight and waiting to figure out what they're actually going to become when they grow up. So
that's fair.
there's that. Also, the other thing I learned is the process of building like extensions or plugins for it, which I do a lot of, is significantly more complicated in Raycast than it is in Alfred. That one I learned. Because like there is no like GUI to build stuff from what I found. It's all code, which is fine. I can do that. But it means that for it to be easy for somebody else to understand, it immediately pigeonholes you into being a developer, which currently the Alfred stuff I do doesn't.
If you're going to build your own, yes. If you're me and you're just wanting to install cool stuff, there's lots more options.
Correct. Yep. Absolutely will give you that because the extensions that are out there are quite broad. So if somebody knows that this is not required to write code, I would be all ears. But from what I've seen, that's what it requires. I don't know. It makes me skeptical. All the things. Now, maybe that's just me being an Alfred diehard fan. That's very possible. I will definitely say Joe is biased in this territory, but again, I don't know. So don't expect me to tout Raycast's wonderfulness relatively soon.
Yeah, that's fine. That's fine. I'm still using it though.
Yeah, go for it.
I actually have an article that I'm writing for the Screencast Online newsletter about my use of Raycast and the Obsidian extension. You can do some cool stuff.
Yeah. Again, I'm not saying it's...
That got me in there as an experiment, and I guess the results of the experiment are in at this point.
Yeah.
I'm in with Raycast.
Yeah. I don't know. It's an interesting tool. There are ways of coming at some of the launcher world are quite fascinating. Just my initial usage of it seems slower by quite a bit. I don't know if that's just the indexing process it's going through. I don't know. I never did figure that out. But again, just my initial thoughts on it.
I don't spend hours in my launcher every day, so it doesn't make a difference to me.
Really? I use it, I think, where was it? There was somewhere I saw stats, and I ended up using something in Alfred close to 900 to 1,000 times a day. Like there's something that I'm using that's tied to Alfred that many times in a day, which is ridiculous to me, but it's the way it is. When
you say slower, I mean, let's just say half a second slower, right? 450 seconds you've saved.
Yeah. It's
This is not an enormous amount of time.
Yes, correct. I do know that there were a couple times when I went to launch it that I felt like I was waiting for it to come up. And although that doesn't technically add up to a whole lot, it was frustrating when I'm used to it just immediately coming up as I wanted it. So there's that.
Gotcha.
Anyway, that all said, we should do follow-up. Because
do it.
I can get on a high horse when it comes to launchers. It's just the way it goes. I have my opinions, strongly held. Probably shouldn't do that, but that's the way I do it.
All right.
Let's see. What do we got here? We've got 5 total. I've got 3. I suppose this is my book. I can go first. So the 3 that I have here, 2 of these 3 are questions I was asking of myself. And the first of those 2 questions was, what makes me weird? And basically that's a way of leaning into who am I without needing to, how do I say that? Without being ashamed of my past, I guess is what that turns into. And it gets even confusing for me a little bit, because I found that, like in my notes, I was writing down that I'm a farm kid, and yet I really like all the tech stuff. So even I'm not so sure how that all fits together. So I was like, I'm not sure how this actually plays out, but it is kind of weird. So I'll use it for now. So there's a handful of things along those lines, but not really anything that's worth talking about. It's just a lot of nuance stuff. So it's an interesting process to go through. I would encourage people to go through and like ask what makes me weird, because it is a fascinating journey. It's like, I didn't know that about me. Just the thought experiment. So anyway, that was 1. 2, I was asking the question, what am I afraid of? And this plays out in a whole bunch of scenarios, whether it's, if I'm in a meeting and I feel like I need to speak up, but I'm not, why is that? And I haven't done this daily, but 2 or 3 times a week, I was asking this question of the things that I hesitated on, or the things that I didn't move forward on. Why was that? Like, what was I afraid of in that scenario? And although there wasn't anything like, Joe's terrified of public speaking, like, I don't really have anything like that, but there was a lot of lack of confidence, I found. Like, that's a big thing that seems to come up quite a bit whenever I write these things down. So what's the other word for that? I wouldn't say self-esteem. Being timid, I guess.
Okay.
So that's something I know that I tend to do quite a bit. So anyway, those were the 2 questions. What makes me weird? What am I afraid of? And then the more fun one was playing around with reminders on the Apple Watch. This is actually gold, I found.
Awesome.
Which was not expected. So we've belabored this whole Joe can't time block thing in the past, right? And I started putting together reminders, like using the reminders app on my phone to create reminders. And then on my Mac, I would take those and place them on the calendar in Fantastical, which I'm still not completely sold on Fantastical. I've had issues with it in the past, and I'm still having some weird issues with it. But it's the only one that I've really found that does a good job of, here are my calendar events, and then here are the reminders on the calendar at the same time, so you can see the 2 of them in the same line. I know BusyCal does this, and so I may try that out, because BusyCal is a part of SetApp, if I recall correctly. So anyway, doing that meant that whenever I have those reminders, I can have it set off the watch, which is significantly less. Well, it's more intrusive than having it on my phone, but it's less of a distraction at the same time. It's so weird. Yes. So weird. Which is what I want, but it seems to be extremely helpful, regardless of all the nuances and subtleties that I don't understand quite yet. It does seem to be quite helpful in the terms of me actually getting some things done that I've been struggling to get done. Also, do you turn on like this 30 minute like little tap on your wrist at all? Do you know what I'm talking about? Like it's similar to like the hourly chimes, but I found out that you can, through the accessibility settings, have it like tap your wrist every 15 minutes.
No,
and
that would drive me nuts, actually.
I know that this would drive many, many people nuts. To me, this, as an ADHD person, this is absolutely amazing, because I can accidentally lose 3 hours and not realize it. But
it's like internal cuckoo clock.
It totally is. It totally is. So it's an interesting process, but I know that like that, just making me aware of whenever 15 minutes has passed, has been absolutely gold. And again, like they're saying in the chat, this would drive people nuts. And I know that this would drive a lot of people absolutely bonkers. It works for me. I'll take it.
Right. So Blake had mentioned that if you're sitting for a while, it'll tap you every 50 minutes to stand up. Sometimes you can't stand up, like maybe if you're in an airplane. So if you just pump your wrist a lot like this, you actually get credit for it. It looks a
All
little
right.
weird if it's the people around, but
Yeah.
if
Yeah.
you want to close those rings, I mean, sometimes you got to do what you got to do.
So instead of standing like it wants you to, you play a game and don't do it.
Well, normally I do that when I have stood previously and I didn't get credit for it. I'm like, oh, come
Oh, sure. I stood up, I promise. I did notice, so the whole stand for the hour thing. I was in a meeting on Tuesday. I sat down before, what time was the meeting? 1 o'clock. And I didn't get up until almost 3. So I know that the hour of 2 p.m. or 1 p.m. through 2 o'clock, I didn't stand. But at one point, I just kind of hung my wrist down and like put my feet straight out. And it gave me credit for that. And I was like, huh, that should not count. I mean, I'll take it, but that shouldn't count at all. Just saying.
Worst is when you haven't done any exercise for the day and it tells you that you've closed your exercise ring.
I have the opposite.
I I have been a little too sedentary for a little too long. My heart rate is escalating
Yep.
just by going up the stairs or something.
Yep. Yeah, I had to so I got the Apple Watch on Wednesday. I didn't actually start using it till Thursday. And the very first workout I ever logged on it was when I went to play basketball on Friday morning. And after doing some reading, I learned that I actually calibrated it to read exercise at like 140 BPM on a heart rate of 140, 150, 160, somewhere in that territory. So it calibrated it as this is what exercise is. And then for the next 2 days, it didn't matter. At one point, I literally went and ran the stairs at our house for 5 minutes straight, and it didn't count it at all. It's like, huh. So I did the whole reset and then like did some outdoor walks and stuff. Like, cause that ain't gonna
Normally
fly.
for me, the only time it logs it is when I'm actually triggering a workout. But
Sure.
glad you like it though. I like mine a lot.
It's been a fun experiment so far. Anyway, that all to say, reminders and Apple Watch have been an interesting experiment. Learning lots.
Cool. So I have 2 action items which are in progress but not finished yet. The personal mantra, I actually came across a version of this. So Baron Fig has a manifesto poster, which I'll share in the chat. This is kind of exactly what I want to do with mine. And I've been collecting these little phrases that I want to appear on here. So like create, not consume is one.
Sure.
Keep going, keep growing, stuff like that. But I am not sold yet on what I want all my phrases to be. So it's in progress, and I don't know that I'll have it done in the next couple of weeks or whatever. But I think this is a really cool exercise. And now I have a visual, which is making me very excited to actually finish this thing. So I'm going to do that. And then the personal mantra, I feel like this needs to come from the manifesto. But I have been actually implementing a version of this. So I say a version because I've basically borrowed this. Someone I heard say this, and I've adopted it as my own for the current season that I'm in with the day job, and that is I can do hard things. So, and it's not just the day job. It's anytime that I'm starting to get frustrated by something, it's harder than I feel it should be. Just take a breath. I can do hard things. So the personal mantra is actually paying off, even though it's not my personal mantra yet. It's sort of
All
an
right.
adopted mantra.
Nice.
But it's what I've needed the last couple weeks. So I
Sure.
like this.
Cool.
When I actually finish these in their totality, I'll be happy to share these. But this is a really cool exercise.
Yeah, as long as they're I suppose as long as they're in some shareable form. Sometimes I feel like I write those in notes that it's like, sure, I don't know how to share this. It's like in a weird sketch on a piece of paper somewhere. But that's me.
Well, I will tell you one place if you really want to see it. The moment that it gets finished, I've been doing this experiment with the faith-based productivity community inside a circle, and I love this thing. The circle is awesome. There's like 150 folks in there now, and people are like sharing their personal mission statements, and this is awesome. So if you're like a lot of people and really freaked out about the future of Twitter, come join the nice side of the internet. Which, by the way, as an aside, I don't think Twitter, the way I use it anyways, it's gonna change all that much. It's always been a business thing for me. And all these people who are lamenting the cost of the blue check mark and they want to be able to just hang out with their friends, Twitter has never been that for me. I've never been that famous. And anytime you get everybody around, everybody involved, that you're gonna have jerks. Every village has idiots.
Yes. Yes.
So I don't know. We'll see how it shakes out. I mean, I'm not a huge Elon Musk fan anyways, but I don't think the world is ending just because he took it over. So
No. I mean,
it is what
there's.
it is.
I think
But
there are definitely mistakes made, but
yes.
like I post to my own website and it goes to Twitter and micro.blog and Tumblr and Reddit and it goes a bunch of places. So if you don't like Twitter, you can still get all of the stuff I do like 4 other places. So
That's the thing. That's the thing. You're going to be able to find the stuff other places if it really were to disappear. And then the other thing is if you're looking for any sort of community, Twitter has never been it. What's going to happen if Twitter were to just disappear tomorrow is that there's going to be all these little micro communities that spring up. Twitter is not going to be replaced with something like Twitter.
right.
If it really goes away, it's going to be these gated communities, which are actually better in a lot of ways. Because if someone's being a jerk in the faith-based productivity community, it's free.
Yep.
If you're being a jerk, I'm going to kick you out.
Correct. Yes.
And if you don't mind, I'd like to plug one other thing.
Okay.
We've got a New Year calendar that we do for the Focus podcast, and we got the 2023 version done. So I'll share a link in the show notes for people, but it is live now, and it's basically the same as the 2022 version. There is an additional PDF download though for like planning your day that I put together. There's a video on the product page, which kind of walks you through how to use it. So the New Year calendar, I don't know if you ever used the New Year calendar, Joe. I think I probably gave you one at one point. But it's like the whole year at a glance, and like the quarters are shaded, so you can quickly see. You know, I've got a crazy busy. Carol's got hers, awesome. Crazy busy month coming up. I'm not gonna commit to anything else in that because I know like even if I have technically the space for it, it's just too much. I can't handle it. Try to space things out, you know. But the other side of that has been like the planning your day side. So put together a PDF, which I've been playing with on the Remarkable. You could say it's been designed for the Remarkable because I first saw it. Jesse shared it. And I was like, hey, that might be cool on the Remarkable. Could I try it? And then we tried it and we made some changes and I changed the format and things like that. But yeah, I went back and forth with him using the Remarkable as the the test case.
Nice.
So yeah.
Cool. Yeah, I've never used the New Year calendar. I've always used some form of a digital thing. My wife always has a calendar on the wall that's like their homeschool, like field trips and such, but it doesn't really get to be too much other than that. So that's the way it is.
Sure.
People. Hold on a second. And they don't make that easy to do.
I'm not sure what you're talking about.
It's probably good. Okay. Chat stuff. All right, so that all said, let's jump into today's book because I feel like there's a lot we could cover. I have a lot of things in the outline, but we'll see how much of it we actually spend a decent amount of time on. But that said, let's jump in. Today's book is the latest release from Ryan Holiday and it's the second of a 4-book series that he's in the middle of. This is Discipline is Destiny. The first of this series is Courage is Calling, which we've covered here on Bookworm. So if you want to listen to that first, you're welcome to do that. But the 4 virtues piece, and he starts the book off with this, just so you can kind of like, where is this coming from? It's told through the story of Hercules coming to the fork in the road, where he has to choose vice versus virtue. And then he chooses virtue, but then that leads him into the process of, well, what is virtue? And then in the, I guess, ancient world, they tended to refer to virtue as these 4 elements: courage, temperance, justice, and wisdom. So obviously courage leads to Courage is Calling. Discipline is Destiny is the temperance side of that, which it's an interesting choice of words that he's using there. So it's like, okay, here are the 4 elements, 4 virtues, I guess, the 4 components of virtue, but we're going to call temperance discipline. Like, interesting. And I think that makes a little more sense once you get through the book. So definitely an interesting read. Excited to get into this one. But what were your initial thoughts on this, Mike?
Well, first of all, the temperance thing, I can understand where he gets the word discipline. The definition, just a quick Google search, is moderation and self-restraint. So I wasn't, it made sense to me, I guess, discipline and then temperance. However, I am on to Ryan Holiday's formula now. And you mentioned I forget how you phrased it, the virtues, but essentially where they come from is Stoic philosophy. Ryan Holiday is the Stoic guy, and this is not a surprise. I mean, he's been going down this road for a while. However, I feel like at this point, having read the second book in this series, and there is a little bit of overlap with the Courage one, not exactly. It is largely new material, but I also feel like at this point I'm good on the Stoic stuff. It's almost like I like this book a lot. We're gonna get into the meat of it, and obviously the style and rating at the end. And so this is a completely disconnected thought from all of that. But right now, I'm not super excited to read the next one. Again, that has nothing to do with my view of this book in particular. I also read a Gap book recently called Snow Leopard by the Category Pirates guys, the ship 30 for 30 people. And they talk about, because they're all about content creating and finding your niche and stuff like that. So they use people as examples. I think we even talked about this a little bit last episode, like the Mark Manson stuff. Like, I understand where he's coming from with that, but I don't want to be that guy, right? And so they basically outlined, and you can totally see it once you know what you're looking for. Like, Ryan Holiday is the Stoic guy, that's his niche, but also he's not this. I don't want this to sound bad. I'm a big Ryan Holiday fan, but what he's taking and packaging here is essentially not a whole bunch of original thought. He's a really good researcher. He pulls together all these stories and he packages them really well. But my view on picking up a Ryan Holiday book is a little bit different now. When I read The Obstacle's the Way back in the day, I was like, wow, Ryan Holiday came up with this stuff? That is amazing. Like, he is speaking my language. And now it's kind of like, oh, he's just drawing from this Stoic pool. He's repurposing Marcus Aurelius. And that's not necessarily a bad thing. But at this point, I'm like, okay, I get it. I'm ready to move on to something else. Does that make sense?
I think I get the point you're making, but at the end of the day, I think that's what every author does. To some degree or another, they're taking information that they've learned elsewhere, synthesizing it, and then presenting it in their own way. Which,
Yes, but I think there are different ways that you can do that. And I'm finding myself more attracted to books that we in the past have not rated super well, but like the anti-fragile stuff and the thinking fast and slow. Like, those are the people that I want to be around more and more. And that makes me feel a little uncomfortable because I've always been like Ryan Holiday's biggest fan. I
Yeah.
want to be Ryan Holiday. I want to own the bookstore and write books.
Yep.
Like he's been my hero for a long time.
So just because you figured out his formula.
Well,
Is that what you're saying?
It's not that I figured out his formula, but now that I have figured out the formula, I guess, I kind of know, I feel like what to expect, and I'm not sure I need more of this. There's a lot of books to read. I mean, we read a lot of books, but even so, there's no way I'm going to come close to reading all of the potential books that if I knew about them, I would want to read. And that's not me thinking like, oh, my life is almost over and I got to conserve my book reading time.
I've only got so many
This,
books left in me.
yeah. I was a little bit surprised though when I picked this one up and I was like, I guess, when I picked up Courage is Calling, I'm like, yeah, let's do this. Like another Ryan Holiday book. Awesome. Especially once I started going through the introduction here and then even like the first section though, it's kind of like, yeah, you're saying a lot of the same stuff you said before, a little bit different ways. And that's cool, but I don't know, at this point in my reading journey, I'm not super excited to read the other two books. And that was a little bit shocking to me.
Yeah. Interesting. I was not expecting that reaction from you at all. Because I feel like this is very different than Courage is Calling. One of the things I wrote down in my notes about this one, that I went back, I pulled up Courage is Calling to confirm that this was the truth, because I didn't know, because I wrote this down after like 2 chapters in. But the question I asked myself was, did Ryan Holiday do something different this time? He normally would tell a story and then tell us some of the detail around it. This time he did a couple things different in that each of the chapters, he's kind of telling you a story and that's it. He adds to it as you go through it, but the story is the chapter. And he didn't do that in Courage is Calling. He definitely had like a segmented, here's my point, and then the latter third or half of that chapter was him explaining it or talking about the Stoic philosophy behind it. This one, he took a different approach and kind of interspersed the Stoic conjecture, if you will, in the middle of the story, which then meant the story took the entire chapter. But because of him doing it that way, it meant that he could introduce a character in chapter 1 and then continue to expand on that and add bits of that story through the entire book, which he did with about 5 or 6 of these characters that he uses throughout the entire book. He didn't do that in Courage is Calling, and I'm certain he didn't do it in The Obstacle is the Way. So from a writer's stance, regardless of where he's getting his ideas, that's hard to do, and amazing that he managed to pull it off. So that's jumping ahead to the end of this segment, but that's kind of something I noticed was very different this time around. But that's also part of why I love Ryan Holiday. I still love Ryan Holiday. Even if I know what he's doing, I still love the way he's coming at this.
And that is completely fair. I guess as I finished up this book, I could see the pattern from the early books that he had written. I feel like the early books, he's taking a theme in Stoic philosophy. It's not just mapping it to one of the virtues and developing it fully. So I feel what you're going to end up with, the 4 books in this series, is a book and a half to 2 books worth of really original material. He's stretching it out, is how I feel a little bit. And I don't blame him for doing that. If I was Ryan Holiday and I had a book publisher who was, hey, what's the next one going to be? This is totally the approach that I would take. But it means that I don't like these books, specifically Discipline is Destiny. I liked Courage is Calling a little bit better than this one. But both of them, I feel, pale in comparison to things like The Obstacle is the Way, and even Stillness is the Key.
I think I would disagree with that, but
okay,
that's my take. Partially because I feel like, and we can jump into this. This will make more sense. But I feel like some of the topics, it's similar to. I would say it's similar to some of what we talk about in Christianity, in that you may have a specific point in theology, but there's a lot of subtlety around it. And the subtlety is what matters to a lot of those points. Obviously, not all, probably not even a majority, but in the world of Stoicism, I would venture to say it's the same. That the subtleties matter, because there's even, if you look, there's points in this book where you could say they contradict each other, and yet they coincide and live in the same space together. So because of that, it means you have to pay attention to the subtlety, pick and choose, choose your own adventure, if you will, depending on the situation. It's subjective depending on what's happening and what's going on. That tells you which of these to use and apply. So like that's important as well. But I think the details matter when it comes to, like, in this case, comparing courage is calling to discipline is destiny. Just having glanced over the other book before coming into this today, like I feel like they're very different. Like I feel like it's just not. It's not the same. It's not the same realm.
Right.
But
Well, you're right. It's not a direct comparison to courage is calling. Probably the closer comparison is discipline is destiny to stillness is the key. Because if you look at the three sections here, we've got part one, the exterior, which is the body. We've got part two, oh man, I messed up the
temperament,
the temperament, essentially. Yeah, but what's the actual name for
the
part two?
inner domain.
The inner domain. Okay, my mind note got messed up, so I gotta fix that. The inner domain, temperament, and then part three is the magisterial, which is the soul. If you go back to stillness is the key, you've got three parts which line up perfectly with these. Part one is mind, part two is spirit, part three is body. So they're kind of in inverse order. But we've talked about this stuff before.
Yes. Yeah. And I think that this is, and you're not wrong. That was one I didn't go back and compare this to. But I think there's maybe something to be said for, like, there's the four pieces, and like I really want to write about each of these four, but before I even realized that this concept of the four existed, he had put together this stillness is the key and the obstacle is the way. Like he was kind of writing around it, and he's like, okay, I've got all that out there, but I need to put together the format of these four, and I want them all in their own piece, because I feel like there's a lot to say about each one, even though there's probably a lot of elements of each four in both of those books. But I prefer this format over that.
If it had existed first, maybe I would too.
Yeah.
The thing is, I got done with this book and talked to Toby and Rachel. They're like, how was it? It was good. Typical Ryan Holiday book.
Yep.
And then I got thinking, like, if I was going to recommend a Ryan Holiday book to someone, I'm not recommending the Stoic series. I'm probably recommending Stillness is the Key. I maybe am recommending The Obstacle is the Way. But I have a hard time just finding a direct application for, you should really read this one. Even Courage is Calling, like Blake mentioned in the chat, you get done with that one and you want to run through a wall. So if somebody's like really just struggling, I don't know what to do with my life, but you know that they just got to do something. You can't steer a parked car, right? Go ahead and recommend that one. But Discipline is Destiny is different, because it's all about self-control, essentially. You're not going to give somebody a book and be like, here, read this. You need some self-control.
I feel like we could keep going on this for a while, so let's jump into this so we can so that what we're talking about actually makes sense for those who are listening to this and haven't read it. But so we start with this four virtues before the introduction here. Basically, he's laying out the groundwork for why he's got the four books set up, and then he gets into the introduction piece, which I feel like is the setup for why self-discipline is important. And he's essentially talking about the comparison between freedom with plenty. And when you have plenty, it gives you the freedom to do a whole bunch of stuff because your life isn't dependent on, going out hunting, gathering, protecting yourself and such. So because of that, it means that if you have the freedom and plenty, you're able to change your circumstances when they get hard. That does not mean that you should always change things when they get hard, because then you're constantly escaping hard things, right? And
Yep.
As Eisenhower said, as he calls out in here, it's like opportunity for self-discipline is what freedom gives you. So if you have the freedom to do anything and everything you want, that gives you the opportunity to practice self-discipline. Or the way that Ryan put it, discipline then is both predictive and deterministic of your outcomes. So when you're given the freedoms to do whatever and choose whatever, like that's the most important time to implement self-discipline.
Yes. I like the introduction. I took 0 notes on it though,
Yeah.
because it felt like stuff that we had heard before. I do think it sets the stage very well for the rest of the book, however.
Yeah, I don't think I would argue that this isn't repetitive, but you have to keep in mind, like, it has to be a standalone book at the same time. Like, it can't be something that's dependent on you having read another one. So he's got to do a little bit of repeating here. So that one I get
agree.
a lot
I
of
agree.
people do that.
The best definition I can come up with for like how I feel coming away from this is feel like with the structure of Discipline is Destiny, he is moving more towards like the Seth Godin style. Very short chapters, just a couple of pages.
Yeah, I noticed that.
Yeah, but the difference is that Seth Godin, for whatever reason, the way that he packages those micro essays into a book, I feel like I absolutely have to read whatever Seth Godin comes out with next because it's going to be completely new.
Right.
And with this, I feel like I know the roadmap and I can probably predict some of the things that are going to be in the next book. And that's not a bad thing. And I don't blame Ryan Holiday for doing that, but it means that I am less excited about the third book in this series.
Yeah, I might be the opposite. Like, I feel like, so the 4, courage, temperance, justice, and wisdom, I feel like courage and temperance, like this discipline and like go run through a wall concept that you're saying, I feel like that's a lot of what we've talked about whenever it comes to Stoicism. The concept of enacting justice and developing wisdom, I feel like those have been skipped over so far. So I'm a little more interested in seeing what those are, because I don't feel like we've covered that. Maybe I'm wrong, and it's just a different perspective I've not considered, but I don't know.
Could be.
Not a Stoic, so I couldn't tell you.
Time will tell, because I'm sure we'll talk about it at some point.
I'm sure we will. All right, so let's step into part 1, which is the exterior, the body. As he says here, if we don't dominate ourselves physically, who and what does dominate? Outside forces, laziness, adversity, entropy, atrophy, like all bad things. So we're starting this book off by dominating the physical realm in our own body. And the first chapter in this section is called Ruling Over the Body, in which we get a pretty lengthy, detailed, borderline gruesome explanation of Lou Gehrig and his 2,130 game playing streak through his development of illness and disease. And the one thing, obviously there's a whole bunch of physical feat that comes with playing over 2,000 baseball games in a row, because it's not all roses and wheat fields. But the thing that one of the pieces of this that really struck me was at one point they ended up x-raying his hand, and he had 17 healed fractures in his hand, and the coaching staff had no idea he'd ever broken a finger. Like,
Yep.
he's played with how many broken fingers, and nobody knew it because he just kept going. Didn't matter how he felt, he had a job to do. And although I don't say I would encourage that extent of a mindset, it does make the point that if you're going to dedicate yourself to a goal and a mission, ruling over your physical realm is very important.
Yes. I feel the purpose of leading with this story is a little bit of shock value, because the typical person who is interested in self-help books picks this one up and is probably comparing themselves to a lot of other people who aren't even disciplined enough to read a book. I mean, most Americans are not. So they're thinking, I'm pretty good. And he's basically got in this first chapter locate you and say, no, you suck, without actually saying that.
Yes. Yep.
It's like, oh, you think you're really good? Well, check out Lou Gehrig, because
Correct.
he had 17 broken fingers and no one even knew.
Yes.
And at that point, you're like, yeah, I complained the last time I had a sniffly nose and didn't want to go to work. So,
Yes. Yep. I feel like this is important though, because if you look at the whole structure of this, to me it feels like he set this up, like he spent a lot of time developing the structure, as we find out much later in the book. But
yep,
he has to set this up such that he can find someone so ridiculous in their pursuit of physical fitness and towards a mission that he can pretty much knock down anybody who thinks that they're doing really well and they can fight through pain and they can do all these things, and they dominate themselves very well. He's trying to find somebody that can bring you down a notch to set you up to be receptive to the rest of it. So I feel like it's important that he does that. It definitely worked for me. It's like, it's cold outside. I really don't want to go walk the dog.
And this is where Ryan Holiday shines, because he basically says, you are a pathetic little wimp, without saying that. Whereas Jocko Willink would just say it to your face.
Correct.
Ryan Holiday does it a lot more nicely, and he actually inspires you with these stories. You walk out of every single one of these chapters being like, man, I want to do better. I want to be like that person that I just read about. I want to be the subject of those stories in 100 years. And so it's perfect. The perfect beginning to this book.
Yes. So he starts us there. The next chapter is Attack the Dawn. He talks about Toni Morrison getting up and writing. But then he dives into the strenuous life is the best life. And when I read the title, I immediately thought, oh, here comes Teddy Roosevelt. But then he started with King George IV instead. It's like, that was not what I was expecting, where we were going to go. And he tells the story of King George being a glutton and realizing too late that he's ruined his life by eating too much, essentially. And then he tells us about Teddy Roosevelt. It's like, okay, all right, now the world is we're now all right with the world because Teddy Roosevelt's been brought up when we're talking about a strenuous life. So I don't think we need to repeat the story there, but basically he was born weak and he overcomes it. Teddy Roosevelt, that is. So the moral of the story of this section here, this chapter, is do some exercise. Really, that's kind of what I got from that.
Not just some exercise.
Yeah, beat yourself.
Hours of exercise per day.
Yep.
So I'm pretty consistent with my workout routines. I work out usually 6 days a week between lifting, running, biking. And even I, after reading that chapter, was like, I got to do better. Part of it is I have this rowing machine that Blake made me buy that I don't use. So
that Blake made you buy. Interesting. Okay.
Well, he is definitely the enabler there and the instigator by saying this is the good one. Yeah, thanks a lot, Blake. It is good. It's a Concept 2 rower, and it was essential during COVID when I wasn't going to the gym. But it's just sitting in our basement, and I have been thinking for a while, I should really, beginning of my day, I should be spending just 10 minutes on the rowing machine, not changing any of my other workout routines. I can squeeze in 10 more minutes, and just elevating the heart rate right at the beginning of the day. I feel like that could help out a lot. And in the past, I just excuse it because I work out 6 days a week. I'm good. Right? But no, you can do better. That's the whole point of this entire book. And the thing with this for me is the you mentioned attack the dawn. That's actually where one of my action items comes from. I only wrote down two action items from this book, but they are both related. They both have to do with different chapters we are going to cover. So I'll just share the first one here, which is get up earlier. He mentions in the attack the dawn part that nobody is a morning person, but it is still for almost everybody. And that really got me thinking, that description, because we look for those excuses. We look for the reasons why we can't. And Ryan Holiday is really good at saying, no, you're not the the special person that you think you are. And I shouldn't say that way, but you get my point. Like, you're not, because a lot of people feel like, oh well, yeah, 98% of people need 8 hours of sleep, but I'm one of the 2%. Right? They excuse it
Sure you are. Yeah.
because, yeah. So I think we do the same sort of thing with, well, I can't get up earlier, I'm not a morning person. The same logic applies. Well, not everybody's a morning person, so I must fall into that other category because this is hard for me. No, it's hard, but you should still do it anyways. So I'm gonna get up earlier.
All right. That's fair. Yeah. Not from Attack the Dawn, but the strenuous life is the best life. Like, I'm not one that has exercised. I have long said, like, I move so much during the day that I'm not sure exercise is really required of me. Like, I've said that for a long time. And when I got the Apple Watch, I realized just how true that is, because like the move goals with it that it comes with, I just completely obliterated those the first week. Like, I want you to burn 300 calories. Okay, how about 950? Like, okay, that's why I eat like a horse sometimes, because I'm just making up for burned calories. So anyway, that's been an interesting learning. But at the same time, like, I don't do any form of like technical exercise, like setting aside time to exercise. So I've been doing that the last few days just to, early in the morning. I'm up at 5:30 anyway, most days. So the whole like get up earlier, like, no, that's when there's a 4 at the beginning, I draw a line. So I'm not going to do that. But trying to do some formal exercise in the mornings, have done that the last few days, and that seems to make a pretty big difference, actually. So hoping to continue that one and hopefully not die in the process. So don't think that would happen. But anyway, that's a big one that I'm working on. There's a few other chapters in here. I'm going to skip ahead a little bit to one called Hustle, Hustle, Hustle. And there's a reason I want to bring this up, but this is where we talk about General George McClellan and Abraham Lincoln, and Lincoln saying that he has a case of the slows. Basically, McClellan, nobody could get him to actually move into attacking in the middle of battle. And yet, in the world of military, I know it's very common for people to talk about a sense of urgency and just, move quickly. This is why we do all the training, so that we can move fast when we're ready to go. And all right, let me just read some of this. So basically, hustle he's referring to as like a sense of urgency, like, let's move. And what he says here is that this sense of urgency, the other more practical word for this is hustle, whether in business or in sports or combat. All the greats have it. Those who don't, we lament what could have been. Now, I bring this up because you wrote a book called Hustle. And
Thou shalt hustle.
yes, thou shalt hustle. I wanted to get your take on this. Like, he's talking about just keep running and don't sit on your laurels. Don't sit on the back bench, I guess. I know I'm saying this knowing that the next chapter is called Slow Down to Go Faster. So he does talk about slowing down, but what's your take on this one, Mike?
Yeah. So I think Gary Vaynerchuk has done the word hustle a disservice. I agree with everything Ryan Holiday says in this chapter. I also think just the title of it is going to put some people off, and maybe knowing Ryan Holiday a little bit, that is intentional. Maybe he chose that word specifically because he knows there's this stigma attached to it. Now, This is not in the book. This is in the update to the book, which will get done at some point. But the definition of hustle is to force to move hurriedly or unceremoniously in a specified direction. That is very different than what most people think of hustle, the Gary V style, like just find something to do and do it with a crazy amount of energy, never sleep. So I I have issues with that picture. I do think you're right. It has to be coupled with the next chapter, the slow down to go faster. There's a phrase in there, by the way, festina lente, which means to make haste slowly. That's hustle, in my opinion. It's not doing a Herculean amount of effort every single day, but it's doing something every day because you realize that you don't have days to waste. So you show up and you do something, and that consistency produces the results that you're looking at. In fact, there's a quote that I jotted down in my mind note file from that next chapter that says, hustling isn't always about hurrying, it is about getting things done properly. And there's a phrase from the military, slow is smooth and smooth is fast. I agree with that 100%. So, all that to say, yes, I agree that hustle is a good thing. However, you have to look at the totality of that, what that actually is, in order to really understand it. And most people are just going to settle for the surface level revelation and immediately get the picture of Gary Vee in their head and be like, I want nothing to do with that. And I understand that too.
Yeah. Yeah. I do know that, quick side note, Gary Vee doesn't expect that of his own employees. Which
It's true.
you would not necessarily realize, but he knows, like, he's the one that's passionate about his business, and he's the one that will run 4,000 miles an hour because 100 is way too slow. But he will not expect his employees to do that. It's like, I'm paying you to do a job. That does not mean you have to have the passion and drive that I do because I own and love the business. It's like, I'm not expecting my people to have that. So he'll tell you that. But it's kind of weird when you hear him say it because he kind of seems to expect that of everybody, the way he talks. So it's kind of, how
Well,
does this all work together?
this is why you got to be conscious of what's the totality of the message that you're putting out into the world. And Gary Vaynerchuk is another one that they kind of do like case studies of in that Snow Leopard book. And again, like after reading that and diving into like how some of these really famous creators have built their platform, their audience, their niche, it becomes obvious to me like there's certain things I just don't want to do it that way. And I think Gary Vaynerchuk has leveraged what his audience wants, which this maybe sounds bad, but essentially he's going for the shallow stuff, the easy life hack type stuff, the quick sound bites, the TikToks, the short videos, just give people a jolt in the arm. You're not going to get the whole message about hustle from those things. So you got to recognize that just by embracing that, you're saying something even when you're not saying it. And it has ripple effects. So I don't know if Gary Vaynerchuk and Elon Musk know each other personally, but everyone who follows both of those people can totally make the connection, even though Gary Vee doesn't run his company that way. They associate that mindset that Gary Vee has with what they see Elon Musk doing, where basically, as we record this, he's said, get ready to work really long hours or get out of here. And so that's not good. That's not a net win for the world.
Yeah, I don't know. Obviously, he finds people who do this, but I am not one of them. Like, I'll hustle all day long, but not at the day job. Like, I'll hustle and get a lot done at the day job and then go home and do it again, but it's on a completely different realm. Like, it's my own world, so it's just different. So doing that all day long for someone else's company, I feel like I would struggle with that. But I feel like that's a good place to let's jump into the last piece I have in this part. Sleep is an active character. Talking about not wanting to hustle and bust your tail all day long. Let's talk about Archie Moore, which I thought this was absolutely, I don't want to say hilarious, but it was kind of funny to me. Archie Moore, heavyweight boxer, was going into a fight for the title. I didn't write down the year, so I don't know when this was. He slept 11 and a half hours the night before this fight. And if that wasn't enough, he took a 3-hour nap before the fight. I think sometime late morning, maybe. Took another short nap before stepping into the ring. And then proceeded to win in the 5th round because his opponent was exhausted. And it's like, Number one, I don't think I could sleep that long if I wanted to.
You're not training to be a boxer either.
No, I'm not. That's valid. That said, I slept really well last night because I am not used to doing a 20, 30-minute workout early in the morning and then doing my day. So I was very tired last night. So I get that. But the point was, if you're going to do a lot of high-value, high-energy work, sleep has to become important. I know you talk about sleep regularly. This is not something I think I've really like jumped onto the bandwagon with sleep. Part of that is like the farming background. It's like you don't get a choice. Like you're gonna bust your tail till 11 at night, get up at 4 a.m. and off to the races you go. Like there is no option. But I have that option now, and I feel like this is something I need to prioritize more. So I've got an action item off of this because what I've been doing over the last week, this is actually going to lead me into having gap books in the future more too, I think, is I've been opting to not pick up my phone after 8 p.m. at all. I don't want to say I've spent a lot of time on computer and phone after that time. It's just like the quick checks and stuff can lead to like 5 minutes here or there. And that's not huge, but at the same time, it does make a difference. So I've stopped doing that, and instead I've, grabbed a shower before bed, make a cup of tea, grab a book, sit and read for 45 minutes. And that's become kind of my wind down, get ready for bed routine. I sleep a lot better now, which I think that's pretty obvious, but at the same time, like there's a little bit of like it takes some discipline to keep that habit, to build that habit, when it's easy to just grab and scroll through Instagram or TikTok or whatever. Like that's easy, but that's, as Ryan Holiday is telling us this whole time, like it's not the route to the higher life, I guess.
Exactly. Yeah, I am a big proponent of sleep. I was diagnosed with epilepsy when I was 18 years old. Had a seizure standing in line at a McDonald's. The person I fainted into was a nurse, put me on my side till the ambulance got there. Had one other seizure my freshman year of college. Have not had any issues since then because I believe I have modified my habits and prioritized not just getting enough sleep, but doing what I can to get good sleep. The blackout curtains, the weighted blanket, all that kind of stuff. So I didn't really have a choice. I guess that would have disqualified me from being a farmer. However, I feel that there are a lot of people who feel like they don't have a choice, that they really do. If you are going to look at your habits and the things that you do, you can recognize after reading something like this, like, yeah, I could go to bed a little bit earlier, and that would just stop using my phone at night, stuff like that. A lot of people say, oh, blue light doesn't make a difference to me. Really? Probably because you're sitting there staring at your phone until it's midnight, and then you just fall asleep because you're exhausted, and then you get up at 6 because your alarm goes off and you got to get ready for work. But that's not the ideal. And the fact that you've done it for a while doesn't mean that you're not paying a price for that lifestyle. Again, a lot of people feel like, oh, I'm the minority, I don't need that much sleep. Yes, you do. You do.
Yep.
I'll say that about everybody, even though it's not everybody. But just to be safe, let's round up here.
Yep.
You do.
Yep.
Get your sleep.
If I say yes, better. You do, I'm right more often than I'm wrong. Like that's the way it goes. Sleep is important, but let's move on to part 2 here, because we've been talking about like everything in the physical realm, right? The exterior, the body. Part 2 is about the inner domain, the temperament. So this is your mind and the mental discipline that that we're going to step into next. And this all starts off with a chapter called Ruling Over Yourself. And this is where we're introduced to Queen Elizabeth II. And this is like, I'm not British, so the whole king queen monarchy, I don't understand the detail around all of that. Regardless, it sounds like, just the character sketch that we're given here. She has a lot that she managed and that she had been in control of, and the way that she came at it. But one of the things I wrote about it is like she had developed rigorous disciplines of the mind so that she could endure some people, persuade some people, and basically navigate a lot of difficult situations as queen. Yeah, as they're saying in the chat, watch The Crown. Yeah, I've watched some of The Crown. Like, I don't know how much of that's a trust, though. Anyway, there's that.
Yeah.
Anyway, we get this sketch of Queen Elizabeth II, and she comes up in a number of other chapters. I don't know that we'll end up talking about those specifically with her, but just knowing that she has to go through a lot of things, but doesn't actually have power over the government and doesn't really make decisions for anything of true influence, and yet has a ton of influence. Like, that's tough to get your mind around, and yet that's the point, right? If you can rule over yourself, you can have this type of an impact without having to be explicit about it.
Yeah, I'm trying to come up with different words for this, but I can't. Essentially, what you're saying though is like they don't have a direct impact over everything. They don't sign the laws, etc. But they do have influence because people are always watching them. As a parent, you understand.
Correct. Yes.
Is like, because more is caught than taught, and it doesn't matter what you say. What matters is what you do. Your kids are watching you 24/7, and if you roll your eyes or do something that's not in line with the character you want to portray, they're going to remember that. You really got to be on your A game. And so that's essentially what he's saying, is that Queen Elizabeth has had to be on her A game ever since she was like 17 years old and became the queen or whatever. Really, really long time. And that is a Herculean task. Going all the way back to the story in the introduction, like that is a big deal. And that feels like a lot of pressure and a lot of responsibility. But I think the takeaway here, again, like he's going into a new section, and again, he's trying to inspire you. And the way that he does that is by using a story that you don't measure up to.
Correct. Yep.
But that's effective because these are people. And so you can look at that and be like, well, yes, she was the queen, but she is a human. I'm a human. If someone else can do this, then maybe I have the same capacity or ability inside of me, or maybe I don't have it right now, but I at least have the potential and it can be developed. Like you see somebody else who has physically done something, and then it seems like that's at least a possibility for you, right? You still have a choice of whether you're going to apply the self-discipline and get to that point, but it's at least a possibility at that point.
Yes. And again, this is like you were saying, like this is a setup. Like, let me show you how, insignificant you are and how somebody else can do better than you, which means you have a lot of work to do. So he does set that up quite well. There's another section that I'm going to skip over here that has to do with like a pause, like making a pause before you act on something. But the one after that, keep the main thing the main thing. We get a story about Booker T. Washington being so dedicated to his mission that he said no to many, many, many things. And I just think it's interesting. This is the concept. I feel like we talk about this in a lot of different arenas, but like the Stoics say, if you don't know where you're sailing, no wind is favorable. And it has this air of you got to know what your mission is and what your goal is. Annual goals is what Mike tells us we should always set up, right? Right, Mike? Annual goals? That's the goal, right? He's staring at me. Like it's uncomfortable. No, Mike would not say that.
I'm actually being nicer to goals, but yes, I think habits are still better than goals. So I would advise you maybe don't set the annual goals, maybe set some themes and try to live those out every day, and the score will take care of itself.
Interesting side note, you don't really hear like George Washington didn't set up annual goals. Beethoven didn't set up annual goals. These are people like they had missions that they were driving towards, but they didn't say they had specific goals. So,
I mean, if you look at the creators in that book, The Daily Rituals by Mason Curry, I would wager a lot of them did not have goals. The really prolific ones, they just showed up and wrote every day. They showed up and created every day. And it's those rituals that produce the prolific output. And now I can see a situation where you would have a goal, you sign a book deal, whatever, and the publisher says, okay, you got to have it done by this date and you've got an advance. So you have to publish it before you run out of money.
right, right.
So there's very much that whole process could be anchored in, you could argue, goals, but I feel like the ones who really just do it and the ones that become famous for it, the ones who like their stuff lives on, this the money is almost secondary. It's like the Walt Disney thing. We don't make movies to make more money. We make money so we can make more movies. Like that's the vibe I get from the people who are really prolific with this stuff. They would do it anyways, even if they never got paid.
Right.
If they could.
This is one part of the reason I brought this up. This is like an area that doesn't talk about. I also don't know that this is the book for it either. About like, what is your mission? Like, what are you driving towards? Like, he tends to refer to like always work towards your mission, and like that's something that you hold on tight to. But he never says anything about how to determine what that is if you don't have it. Now, I kind of know where I land on that. You obviously know where you land on this, but this isn't really something he ever touches on. Again, I'm not sure he should have in this particular book, but it is something that he kind of glosses over.
That is a great example of being boxed in by the Stoic virtues. Because, yes, I would love to hear that train of thought extended. And there are places where it was natural to do so after some of these short essays. But you're right, just didn't fit.
It is a 300-page book, though, too. So it would have just gotten longer. I don't know. Maybe that's in the wisdom book. I don't know what it is. I would love to see his take on that. But I've listened to a few of his podcasts, but I don't feel like I've ever heard him talk about that topic. So, anyway, just a interesting side note. So, keep the main thing. Basically, say no to things that take you away from whatever this mission is that you are working towards. We skip forward a few chapters here, and then we get to one called Do the Hard Thing First. I'm bringing this up because we've talked about this topic in the last few episodes of like eat the ice cream first versus eat the frog first. And
yeah,
although I get that concept for people with ADHD, I don't know. Like I feel like I get sucked into the ice cream world if I don't start with frogs, and that's just me. Anyway, I've kind of been trying to make sure I'm doing the things I don't want to do first in the morning, and that seems to work okay. But that's a motivation thing. That's a whole big can of worms that I've been working on, knowing that this is a disconnect in my own wiring. So there's that.
Yeah, this is an example of Ryan Holiday basically saying like, just do it, and telling you suck if you don't, because one of the things I wrote down from this one is that fools wait for the right time. Oh, so if I wait for the right time, I'm a fool? Essentially, yeah. And what are you going to do with that? Are you going to just write off everything else that he says? Or are you going to look at the mirror and be like, maybe I am a fool? The older I get, the more I realize I am more often than not the fool. And so that actually is very freeing. That opens up a lot of possibilities. When you say I am the problem, that also means you are the solution. You have the power to change your world. And I believe in that a lot. But yeah, I thought of that too with the eat the frog section here, because if eating the frog isn't working, what are your options? You can look for something else, find another reason. And I'm not saying that that's necessarily wrong either, but I feel like that's a dangerous mindset to apply just generally. I would prefer to think like, I'm going to give this person who is writing these books and is obviously very smart and done all this research a lot of, I'm going to give them the benefit of the doubt and assume that if I'm having trouble applying something here, I should take an honest look at where can I get better and not just excuse it. Again, I'm not saying that that is necessarily what Jesse was saying with the eat the ice cream thing, but just don't take the bait. There's always going to be an opportunity there to be like, oh well, it's no big deal, and maybe it really is a big deal. Like I don't. I've not been diagnosed with ADHD, so I can't speak to this. I don't know what people who have to take medication for this, what they really are going through, the way their brain is wired. So I'm not going to speak to this. All I know is that applying it personally to myself. If someone says this has worked for a lot of other people and it's not working for you and you got to change, I'm going to ask myself, are they right? Do I need to change? And I'm going to at least try it. Maybe it'll stick, maybe it won't. I'm sure I'm going to fail. It kind of ends this whole book that way, by the way. This whole discipline is destiny, by saying like, this is the path, this is the journey. We're all on this and we all fail at it all the time. We're just trying to get a little bit better.
Yep. Yeah. And when you said like to wait is to be a fool, know that this chapter where he says that is 2 chapters after he's talking about patience and waiting to do the thing intentionally. That's why I said like this, it has to do with subtleties. Like it's important to know the circumstances and what's going on around it. Yeah. So, 2 more here out of this particular part. One of them is a ways down on this list. He talks about respect time. Obviously, this is something I've been focusing on a lot. I know with my whole ADHD thing, I'm very prone to time blindness and I'm not even aware of how much time has passed. Sometimes it feels like it's 2 minutes and it's been an hour. Sometimes it feels like it's been, 4 hours and or feels like it's been 5 minutes and it's been like 4 hours. Like it totally just throws me off sometimes. Thus the every 15-minute tap on the wrist that'll drive people absolutely crazy. But he just has a quote here that I thought was interesting. Now is the time because now is the only time you have. And yeah. I feel like that's something that a lot of people need to remember, because it's very easy to think about, I don't want to do this today. I'm going to have time tomorrow. I'll do it then. Well, now you've procrastinated how many times? Like if it's that important now, like if it's that mission critical to you, now's your time. Like waiting till tomorrow is not going to get you very far.
Yeah, and there's a whole nother message in there with like, actually do the work, don't just talk about it. But just confining it to this respect time chapter, I also really liked this one. Mentioned that no one is able to make more time, which is very true. And that routine is an essential tool in managing time. But the big thing that punched me in the face from this chapter was this idea that when we waste time, it also wastes us. I immediately thought of that Wait But Why calendar, where you have like the moment that you're born and then the average lifespan of 80 years. And the idea is that you color in shade the boxes and you can see your life disappearing in front of you.
Yep.
And that is a sobering thought. Harkens back to the 4,000 Weeks by Oliver Berkman, actually. But really, it's just an encouragement. It depends on how you view this, right? You can view this as, oh, that's depressing. I don't want to think about dying. But again, Ryan Holiday is the stoic guy. So maybe that's why he didn't talk about personal mission, because it really doesn't matter. You're here just for a moment.
Interesting.
And you're not do anything worthwhile anyways. So why even talk about it?
Just go farm cattle on your ranch and be done.
I don't know. But anyways, yeah. So the big takeaway when I read that, immediately you can think of like, that's a depressing thought. The fact that when I am spending an hour on social media at the end of the day, I am throwing away an hour of my life. And what is that actually worth? But I I don't know. I don't have trouble reframing that. So it's my initial thought when I hear that statement, and then it's like, okay, well, let's just get busy. Think of Ephesians 5:16, one of the verses I really love about redeeming the time, rescue back, ransom from loss. Right? Doesn't mean that you're going to be productive and hashtag hustle every moment of every day, but you're going to value the time that you have, and you're going to do the very best you can with it. And you're going to care enough to measure it so that you can improve it next time. It boggles my mind why people do not track their time. I'm fighting with some of the stuff in the day job. It's like, people, just track your time. Do you not care about getting better? You keep complaining that you don't have time for all this stuff. And when I ask why, you don't even know because you won't track it. It's like, just do this basic stuff, and then we can talk about how we can make this better for you.
I don't track my time, but I can pretty much tell you the exact amount of time I'm spending on things, though, if you were to ask, because at this point it's all on the calendar. Like, it's not technical tracking, but I have a list of it.
That's fine. That's fine. But it's the people who want to do better, but they don't understand how they could do better.
Sure.
Whatever you don't manage, what's that saying? You can't improve what you don't manage, basically. Whether it's your time, your money, you don't have a budget, you're gonna run out of money before you run out of month.
Yeah, I can't improve what you don't measure. Is that what it is?
Something like that. That's the gist of it, anyways.
Yeah.
And so that, I think that applies to all your resources, not just time. But time is the one that we always feel like, oh, I got plenty of that. No, you don't, and it keeps ticking. So you should get a handle on it as soon as you can.
All right, let's step into part 3 here, looking at the clock. But the magisterial, or the soul, and this starts with a quote here from Theodore Roosevelt. When we rule ourselves, we have the responsibilities of sovereigns, not of subjects. Which took me a little bit to get my mind around, but basically, if I understand this correctly, if you work through the process of developing self-discipline, you've followed developing restraints and control over the body, you're working on your temperament and your mental game. Once you've done all that, it kind of elevates you to a different level without you even really intending it to. And as such, you've gained a lot of responsibility in how you interact with other people. You're not like the subjects working in and around other people. You're kind of above them inadvertently. That's the way I took that. I'm not sure that's true 100%, but that was just my perception of it. And it's kind of enforced by the topic, I guess, the syntopical piece around all of the chapters that follow this, because they all have to do with your interactions with other people in some form. Some of it's very explicit, some of it's kind of implicit. But in all of them, they have to do with like how you're interacting with other people in some form. So you've worked on yourself, both externally and internally, and now you're kind of working with other people. That's the way I interpreted this. And then this is started off with a section called Elevating Yourself, which is just a story kind of explaining this again, like somebody who was given, what's his name? Antoninus Pius? I don't know if that's how you say that.
Yeah, how to pronounce these names.
Yeah, but he basically was preparing the throne for Marcus Aurelius. That's what you need to know. Yep. He could have killed Marcus and just taken it. He had that opportunity many times, and yet he spent basically his entire reign preparing Marcus to take his spot, which
he was a tutor.
Great restraint in itself. But the chapter that I want to talk about more is the next one after that, which is tolerant with others, strict with yourself. And there's a quote in here from Benjamin Franklin: "Search others for their virtues, thyself for thy vices." I really didn't like reading this. This is one of my least favorite chapters in the book, not because I disagreed with it, but because I really don't want to do this at all. Like I would rather reverse this. Like, I'm a good person. You have all these problems. Like, I would rather go down that path. I'm not such a high and mighty person that I'm not doing that.
Why?
Because I'm human at the moment. That's the way it works. At least for me.
Yeah. Well, I think if you dig a little deeper with the why, it is it can be boiled down to it makes you feel better about yourself, right?
Sure. Yeah, that would make
And
absolute
I'm
sense.
picking on you, but applying this to myself as well.
You can pick on me. I can take it. It's fine.
This is why we take that approach. It is not my fault. It is unfair. These other people are being jerks and they should stop. And that is maybe true, but it also is sometimes outside of your control. So what are you going to do? Just complain about that
Right.
or take back control and do something about it? The thing that you can do is not impose power or impose your will over other people, but discipline yourself. And this kind of applies to something that Ed Cole says in the men's ministry stuff that we go through at my church, that we judge ourselves by our intentions, but others by their actions. So if Joe is late, hypothetically speaking, to a Bookworm episode,
That would never
I
happen. Never happen.
naturally, I'm telling on myself, but you can put your own situation, okay? Even if you are able to fight against this belief, this is what your brain naturally says. Doesn't he know how busy I am? Doesn't he know that I've only got this short period of time to record this thing? Doesn't he know there are people waiting? How selfish that he would mismanage his time and be late to a recording. Right now, go ahead and use an example of me on the other hand. Like, this is a really minor, stupid thing. That's why I use this example. It makes no difference, right? Nobody cares except me at that moment if I let my emotions run away and build up this big scenario of what you're doing in the background over there in Minnesota, so far away. Like,
and we're talking about
to,
just to be completely transparent about what we're talking about. This was 4 minutes of time.
Yes.
Just to be completely clear about where, like, that's all it is. It's 4 minutes. That's what we're talking about.
Even if it was an hour, who cares, right? But it's those little things that your brain makes into big things. And that's really why this whole soul section, and why this is so important, because you can't see this part.
Correct. Yeah. And this is super important. I'm bad at this. This is why I brought it up. I regularly in my mind judge people all the time. And sometimes I'm not great about maintaining that in my own thoughts. And what this is convicting me of is that even though I'm having those thoughts, I should be trying to stop those in my own mind and not entertaining those. Because the more I entertain them, the more they repeat themselves, and thus it becomes a problem later on. So that's ultimately why, okay, I've got to stop on this. So search others for their virtues, thyself for thy vices. If I'm looking more for the problems in myself as opposed to looking for those in other people, I'm better off because I can work on those. That's my point.
Yes, and that is tempered perfectly with the second point you have highlighted.
Correct.
Line. I'll let you introduce this one.
Yes, which is be kind to yourself. And again, I wanted this one in here because if you think about all the things we've talked about, the strenuous life, ruling over your body, the hustle piece, like trying to make sure you're sleeping, and we didn't even talk about all the focus stuff and like managing your mental game, putting boundaries up, like all of this, like it gets to where not managing your time correctly, like all this stuff, it's very easy to have failings somewhere in the midst. And we're always trying to be better. And if we're always striving to be better, there's going to be points when you fail, likely a lot of them. So the last thing we need to do is to heap more coals on the fire that you've already created in the failing and punish yourself even more. Like, it's okay to have that failing. Learn from it. Get better next time. It's okay. Be kind to yourself.
This is one that I struggle with. I have a real hard time forgiving myself of stuff that I do wrong. So this is a really good reminder for me. Essentially, what you want to do is recognize the times that you messed up and try to learn from them and move forward. But then you have to be willing to turn the page and let it go. I have a tendency to hold on to that stuff. No one needs to bring up the things that I did 10 years ago because I still remember them.
Sure. Yeah. And so again, I'm bringing that up because I feel like it's necessary given how many things we're talking about that require change and improving, and why you're not as good as Lou Gehrig or the Queen. And then there's a bunch of other stuff in the middle here, but I want to jump to the last chapter in the book, which is self-discipline is virtue. Virtue is self-discipline. And there's a quote he has here that I feel like sums up this entire chapter. Words don't matter, deeds do.
Yep.
And this is slowly becoming something I've been working towards and using as a mantra of sorts. This is worded significantly better than what I've worked on. But it's like, I can think about things all day long, but until something is externalized that I could show somebody else for them to see what I've done, it doesn't matter. Like I haven't shown anything. Like there's nothing to prove that this is something I'm working towards. So until I act on my thoughts, it doesn't matter, which is a little bit hard to hear, but also a great motivator. Words don't matter, deeds do.
Yeah, a different version of that, which I liked, is that virtues can't exist on paper only.
I like that.
It's got to be lived out. And ultimately, that is empowering because we have to be responsible for ourselves, yes, but we all have the choice. Every single day, we have an opportunity to choose to live the virtuous life, whether or not you are a Stoic.
Yeah, and there's an afterword in this. We don't normally talk about the afterword, but there's one piece of this that I wanted to bring up, and that's that he tells his story of how he sat down to write this book and almost quit on it. And then in using the stuff that he taught in this book, he's able to develop a more balanced life over what he's done with his previous books. He has 2 little boys now. And his boys even noticed the massive difference. They even thought he lost his writing job. And but it's because he's built up such a more balanced way of writing a book. Basically, he's doing that as a case study to show you, like, I've screwed this up in the past too. I'm still working on getting better at this. I'm still developing my own skills in this realm. Don't compare yourself to me, basically, is what he's saying. He doesn't ever allude to that, but that's the way I took it. It's like, there's a lot of things that he's done wrong too. And I'm very grateful that he was willing to put his own personal case study in here, because I feel like it puts a lot more weight behind what he's saying in the book.
Yeah, I really like this section. Tells the some of the details of the story are interesting to me, about how he knew that this second book was coming because he signed the deal for the 4 different virtues, and he was freaking out because he wasn't sure how it was gonna come together, but he just kind of trusted the process, and then all of a sudden the way became clear because he was just showing up every day and working on it. So there's a lot of inspiration to be had there. There's also some nuggets I feel in like how they modified their family lifestyle with COVID, and how they're not just embracing the return to what is normal, but just thinking through like what's the best version of this for us, and influencing some control and some putting the thumb on the scale, essentially, which I really believe that is that was a lesson I learned from the lockdowns too. Is like, we got to find new ways to do things, and we don't want to just go back to the way things used to be. What is best for us? And when you think about it that way, you realize some different options. So I think this is really cool way to end it. I think it's very inspiring. It also kind of humanizes Ryan Holiday in a lot of ways. He's sharing some of his struggles. That doesn't devalue anything that he says, in my opinion. That makes him more relatable, more believable, etc. Like, I think higher of him having shared that, it's interesting because that's also coupled with the other stuff that I read in the other books, and just kind of realizing that he's optimizing for something that isn't quite the way that I would want to optimize things. And so that's got me thinking that the next book, meh. But I don't think that's a result of anything that is in this this afterword here specifically. I really appreciate the fact that he added this, even though this is page 300 now at this point.
Correct. Yeah, it's a long one.
Probably at that point thinking like, is this book ever going to end? This is a very effective way to end it.
Yeah. All right, let's step into action items unless there's something else you want to cover here, Mike.
Let's do it.
Okay, so I had 3 that I've got written here. One is this exercise in the morning. These are very practical. So you could actually judge me on these. So doing exercise in the mornings, my goal is to take Sundays off from that. I don't know how that's going to work on the Apple Watch. I got to figure that one out. Surely people take rest days and don't have to lose their exercise streak. But hey, it is what it is. The second one is my evening tea and a book to help me with the sleep component. And obviously I've started all of these already with some success, but I want to make sure that we touch base with them next time and I can continue those so we can have a check-in point. And then the last one is no phone before breakfast. Just because it's easy to get into like negative news. Like I don't want to do that before breakfast. And I know that for me, that means it's roughly a couple hours before I would ever open my phone to even check the weather. So there's that. Anyway, those are the 3. Exercise, evening tea and a book, no phone before breakfast. How about you?
All right. I like the no phone before breakfast. I didn't have an action item from this book specifically related to that, but I've been thinking about this because I have a group of guys at my church, discipleship group essentially, and we use the YouVersion Bible app because they have these reading plans that you can do as a group, and I like how you go through we do the chronological reading plan, and then the last thing it adds to every single daily reading section is what did you get, and so you go into it looking for something to share with the group, and you find it as opposed to just like cranking through it. So I've liked doing that. However, we've done it the last couple of years in a row. I am really thinking that for this next year, I want to just read the paper version of my Bible that I have on my nightstand because I don't want to grab my phone at the beginning of the day. Because most of the time I have the discipline not to check the news, not to check the mail, not to check the Slack, whatever, but it's there. So every once in a while, like I find myself there and it's like, what the heck am I doing?
How did I get here again? Okay.
Right. So my 2 action items are getting up early, and that means going to bed earlier. In bed by 10 p.m. I feel like that's probably the earliest I could do it with our schedule, and getting up earlier, that means protecting that 8 hours of sleep means that 6 a.m., not as early as Joe Bulig, but
also in bed by 9:15, so
yeah,
kind of the same.
Before 9:15 some nights, so
if my wife's out of town, it's like 8:15, 8:30. So
sounds glorious.
I sleep a little longer when she's gone.
Yeah. So I really want to get into that habit though, and I don't want to modify it for a single day. I want this to be every day. I think that's the value of the routine. So I think that's feasible. In bed by 10, up by 6.
All right, style and rating. It's Ryan Holiday. He's a master storyteller. I feel like it'd be very difficult to argue with that. And I know that I feel like he's done quite a bit different this time with how he tells those stories in a positive way. It's interesting to me how many times Lou Gehrig came up throughout the book, not as like, here's another Lou Gehrig story. It's like, here's a 2-liner that shows how Lou Gehrig's situation played into this topic of focus. Like that happened quite a bit. The Queen Elizabeth comes up quite a bit from the point she's introduced in the beginning of part 2. So I love that he did that. It made it very engaging, and I could read this very quickly. I'm not sure how I feel about the segmented off piece, like the shorter chapter component. I feel like it's an interesting way for him to put this together. It definitely has an air of like the almost atomic note concept. Like it's like you were saying, the Seth Godin concept. It definitely has that air. I've always kind of appreciated that take. I'm not sure how I feel about it with Ryan Holiday though, because I've always appreciated like the depth that he brings to things, and I can tell he's got a lot of depth here, without being, I don't feel, superfluous on many things. So I feel like it's well put together. So I'm not sure how I feel about the little tiny pieces component, but at the same time, I really enjoyed reading this book. I don't have like qualms with I got you pegged here, Ryan. This is one that I know that personally self-discipline is something that I've personally struggled with for a long time, and I know that it's like one of my weak points. And having said that, like this has helped me put together like some minor things that I've never fully pieced together, and has kind of given me some of the reasons to work on some things and being okay with doing things the hard way sometimes and seeing the benefit of that. But at the same time, to kind of go back to Benjamin Franklin's quote about searching for vices, like it made me kind of realize how many like little bad habits that I have here and there. It's like, okay, well, I don't know how to work through this, but I need to at least be aware of these and be willing to shut those down. So to me, I feel like this is a very solid book. I've already recommended it a couple times to folks that I know are kind of in the same boat as I am, as far as like how do I develop this idea of self-discipline? Like how do I do that? So I've already recommended it a couple times to folks. To me, this is an easy 5.0 book. Like I absolutely love this. It's a Ryan Holiday book. I love the way he tells the stories. I love the way he's coming at these topics. I'm not a Stoic. I have no intentions of being a Stoic, but I know that a lot of the Stoic ideas tend to overlap with my own viewpoints. So that's easy for me to jump on board with. So 5.0 from me.
All right. So it keeps coming up. I feel like I need to defend some of the comments I made at the beginning. Let me dive into real briefly something that's shared in the Snow Leopard book. They talk about the content pyramid, and the goal of this is essentially to become known for a niche that you own. All right. So they have what they call the content pyramid, 5 different levels, and there's this 1% rule, which kind of underlays all this. 90% of users consume the content, 9% of users curate, organize, and update the content, 1% of users actually create the content. So the content pyramid, there are these different levels. Level 1 is consumption. You can passively consume or you could actively consume, or you're choosing what to consume. I think everybody who listens to Bookworm is involved in the active consumption phase because you get something out of listening to the conversations. Level 2 is curation. This is where you're either sharing, you're adding your own opinion, or you're curating and adding some insight. This is where Ryan Holiday is. And this was kind of shocking to me. So above that, level 3, obvious connection. And this is where Mark Manson resides.
Yep.
Level 4 is the non-obvious connection. This is where you get into the deep thinkers. And I know we went almost a whole episode without talking about How to Read a Book by Mortimer Adler.
You almost made it. Almost made it.
But that is an example of these non-obvious connections. And as I was reading this, and the category 5 is the category creation. So as I'm reading this, the Snow Leopard's book, I'm realizing that the non-obvious connections, those are the ones that really mean the most to me. Syntopical reading, How to Read a Book, why I brought that one up now. But it's never the thing that grabs you the moment that you read it. And essentially with Ryan Holiday being the Stoic guy, yes, he's level 5 category creation, but the way that he's gotten there has essentially been by curating things that already existed, Stoic philosophy and being really good at storytelling. That's great, but I think I would rather look for the people who are going to be the non-obvious connectors. I want to read more of the difficult books. I don't really like, I don't even know how to say his name, Nicholas Taleb, the anti-fragile guy. But he's got some good ideas, and I need to dig in there and figure out what he's really saying. So I walk away from Discipline is Destiny feeling all charged up, excited, motivated, right? Not as much as Courage is Calling, but essentially that's the formula for Ryan Holiday. going to explain some obvious stuff and encourage you to actually go do it, which is completely fine, except that that is not speaking to me as loudly as it once did. I also would say that I don't feel as excited walking away from this one as I did from Courage is Calling. I liked Courage is Calling better. And maybe that's just the subject matter, and courage was the thing that I needed at the time. And discipline is an important topic, but not something that I'm actively excited about. So maybe it's just, it's a timing issue. That could be. I actually do really like the stories, but would have preferred that they be packaged into larger chapters. I think it would have been, my preference would be, tell me everything that you want to tell me about Lou Gehrig. Let's just have a chapter on Lou Gehrig and talk about all the principles around that, so I don't have to like keep tabs of all these things in all these different places. I felt like I had 60 different Chrome tabs open inside my brain when I was reading this one.
I do that all the time, so I'm used to that.
It was a little uncomfortable. So, and that's even without taking action on one of my previous action items, which is reading more than one book at a time. I mean, this felt like reading more than one book at a time. All that to say, he's a phenomenal storyteller. There's one story in particular here that just really impressed me from Turn the Other Cheek, where the Nazi walked up on stage while Martin Luther King Jr. was giving a speech and starts attacking him. And not only does Martin Luther King Jr. not fight back, but when the crowd goes to intervene, he's like, don't touch him, don't touch him. And then after talking to the guy and saying, you're going to be okay, no one's going to hurt you, would you come back to my office and we can talk this through? With an actual Nazi. So not people who are changing their names on Twitter or saying stupid stuff. An actual Nazi, professed Nazi, who is there in the flesh beating you up. Like that is what turning the other cheek really means. Could I do that? Like, again, like you look at these stories, I don't think I got that in me, but I'm aspiring to get to that level of mastery where, yeah, I could actually do that. Right. So really, really good book. I do think Courage is Calling is better, and I have little nitpicks with this one, which really don't affect. I feel the rating of this in general, just stylistically, we're going in different directions. So I'm going to rate it at 4.5 just because I do like Courage is Calling a little bit better, and some of his other books, The Obstacles Away and Stillness is the Key specifically, I liked those better than this one. But as much as I kind of railed on it at the beginning, like, this is a phenomenal book. And I would recommend that everybody read this one. As I said at the beginning, I'm not super excited to continue the journey down the Stoic virtues. I kind of want to get to the end of that so we can figure out what's next from Ryan Holiday. And maybe part of that is just, I want the surprise. I want to know that I want to be surprised with what the next thing he announces is. Kind of like the Apple events, right? When you don't read the leaks going into it and you see the presentation up on stage, you're like, oh, that looks so cool. I prefer that. So maybe that's just personality. I don't know. But really good book. Just taking it in context of everything else, I'm going to rate it slightly lower at 4.5.
Fair enough. All right, let's shelf it. What's next, Mike?
Next is Mind Management, Not Time Management by David Kadavi. I think this was recommended by Carol in the last live recording, but it has been on my radar for a little while. And this one I have received. I have not started it yet. I'm very excited to dig into this one, though.
Should be good. This was actually the one I was going to pick next, but you picked it ahead of me. So excited about getting through that one. Following that one, I feel like this is a book we should have covered at some point. It's ranked pretty high on a lot of lists, and I see it come up very regularly, and I've wanted to cover it for a while. But this is Robert Greene's book, The 48 Laws of Power. And part of me feels like that would be a good follow-up to Discipline is Destiny. Not 100% certain that that's true, but I would like to cover it, partially because it's on a lot of lists, and it seems interesting to me. So we'll give it a shot. 48 Laws of Power. How about Gap books, Mike?
I do have a Gap book. I actually have several Gap books because I stumbled across some recommendations that looked awesome from Ali Abdal. Still waiting for our link, Ali. But the book is Someday is Today by Matthew Dix. The subtitle here is 22 Simple Actionable Ways to Propel Your Creative Life. Really, it's a book about showing up and creating every day, which is a little bit of a thing for me recently.
Fair enough. All right. What we got? So I'm not really doing a Gap book right now, at least not officially. I've got a bank of books that I may be working through. I'm not real sure how much book time I'm going to be cranking through now that I'm reading a little bit more. So we'll see. Got some Charles Dickens books I'm kind of eyeing as well, which doesn't really fit Mike's taste, but
That's true.
fits mine. So there's that. But regardless, we're very grateful to those of you who have joined us live today. It's been kind of fun to read the chat as we go on YouTube. If you haven't joined us live, it's kind of a fun little experience. You get a little behind the scenes stuff before and after the episode as well, kind of some bonus extras, like when Joe shows up late because he's fighting with tech. But regardless, we're always grateful to have you in the chat. It's fun to interact live as well. But we're also super grateful for those of you who join us in the club. Bookworm Club is kind of a cool little place, but club.bookworm.fm, and especially to those of you who are members within that. So bookworm.fm/membership. It's a paid membership that'll get you access to special wallpaper, special area on the forums, our undying gratitude, Mike's MindNode files, all sorts of cool stuff. So we'd love to have you in there if you're not already. And if you are, we absolutely love having you on board, and we're grateful that you help us keep the lights on.
Yes, absolutely. Regarding the MindNode files, there's actually a couple of different versions in there too. So you have the PDF, which is what I've created, but then there's also MindNode files. So if you use MindNode or want to convert it, it's actually an editable mind mapping file. So you can build on what I have already started for you with these mind maps. But if you are reading along with us, pick up Mind Management, Not Time Management by David Kadavi, and we'll talk to you in a couple of weeks.
Cool, cool.
Boom.
Cool, cool. All right, I know you got to run, so we should split, right?
Yes.
What's next? When's our day?
It would be the week after Thanksgiving, if that still works for you. December 1st.
It does. You can do that.
Awesome. Let's do it.
Cool.
2 p.m. Central.
Yes.
All right. Catch all you bookworms later.
All right. See you, team.